All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for saying your hi messages. So, two things. Number one is we are today going to start a different set of things. So today, this is the schedule as we had discussed at the start of the classes. That is at the start on Monday itself. We discussed this. So you notice that there are today and tomorrow we are going to start about programming questions and overall revision as well. And yeah, I'm reading all of your chats. I can see all of your chats right now. So we're going to do these two things today, and we're going to keep in mind TCS NQT also, because that also has programming questions. So we'll do those two together. What I understood is that CTS isn't actually confirmed for 15/16. It's a tentative date, and we hope it gets conducted on 15/16 so that we can start our preparation for NQT. But it's not really 100% done that time. So let's not waste time for our NQT also. We'll continue our NQT prep as well. And from next week, we'll actually do like full on programming MCQs and how you can solve it, those kind of things. But for now, we'll start with our programming questions concepts. But before I start that, we will discuss some of the previous assessments questions. Now, some of you are asking whether we can release the solutions. Absolutely. Our team is working on that. I said it'd be done yesterday. My apologies. It's a little bit delayed, but it's definitely going to be done today. Our team is actively working on that one, and you will get all of the solutions uploaded on the platform today itself, so you can check the solution. You need not watch this entire video again just to see the solution. So you will definitely get the solutions for all of the questions after the assessment is done. And I think by today evening, you will have all of the solutions for sure. We are actively working on that. Trust me, we'll get this done. Yesterday, we had 7 questions on code debugging, 4 of which we had already discussed, or 4 of which we had already completed. And somebody's asking, so you've all, what I asked at the start of the session was if you had any doubts about yesterday's questions, whatever questions were asked in the assessment, and if what are the previous concepts we should revise. So I've got for the first one that the digit sum question. So if I just go back here, 1 second, yeah. So this is the question I guess everybody was stuck in yesterday, the fixed get digit sum, and it is a little bit of a difficult question. I believe this was the 7th question. So out of like 20 questions, so out of 7 questions in Automata Fix, this was the 7th question asked last time around. So that is this one, which we'll look into right now. We'll just look into it. But apart from that, do you have any other concepts in the previous classes that were discussed that you don't really, you're not really familiar with right now? You want me to repeat them? Is there any such thing? Please leave it on the chat and we can discuss that before going into the programming questions today. And don't worry, today's class will take a little bit longer because we are also going to cover pointers, and we are going to look at programming questions, specifically one concept in programming questions, where we'll do 2 questions of those kinds. So that's the entire agenda for today. We'll be looking at a little bit at pointers. A lot of questions can come for pointers in TCS NQT, not so much in CTS. I don't see debugging questions generally asking pointers, arithmetic, and all of that. But yeah, let's just study it today and we'll understand. So yeah, without further delay, we had about 7 questions come yesterday in the assessment, most of which we had already covered. So array sum, check grade, print color, we had done these things. Or print color we had not done, but check grade, array sum, find minimum element, we had completed it. And then there was some modify to print patterns. So it was all previously asked questions or previously discussed questions. If you missed the yesterday's session, you can just go here and check out yesterday's session. So I go here, I click this thing called classes. 1 second. Yeah. If I go here, there is this thing called all upcoming classes. This is our class right now, but I can go to all past classes, which is over here. And I can go here and say CTS session number 2, SRKR 2021. I click this view class. The moment I click this view class, it will open up the recording of the previous day's session. Okay. So you can click this view class to find that recording. So yeah, if you missed out yesterday's session, please check out this part over here. Okay. What we'll do right now is open up one question that, 3 questions that we had not yet discussed. So that is the print color question, the delete duplicate question, and the get digit sum question. These are the 3 questions that had not been discussed. And so we'll have a look at these 3 questions right now. Okay. Now, some of them were easy. I think the only difficult one was get digit sum. It was a little bit more tricky than the usual type of questions. All right. So this is the print color question. It says the function void print color int num is supposed to print names of color according to the given integer num, right? So we are given given an input integer num, which is probably given to us as a as an input to the function that is given there, right? So that's the num over here. That's its input is given over here, right? And when the values of num equals 1, 2, 3, 4 respectively, for 1 we should print red, for 2 we should print black, for 3 we should print white, and for 4 we should print green, right? For any other values we should print no. One second, I'll just reset this. Yeah, we should print no color, right? Now, the problem is the function compiles but fails to return the desired result for some cases. So again, it's one of those questions in which the compilation error is not there. The entire problem is on the logical error, right? So let's run it and see whether it indeed does compile. It compiles, but it gives us, it's actually ended up printing all of the answers: red, black, white, green, no color. It's printing all of them, right? Even when I submit, it's giving wrong answers for all. In fact, it's giving correct answer for some, right? So which is interesting. If it's giving correct answer for some, it means that something is going right. Okay. All right. So what is the issue? So the issue is, let's read the thing. So we could have done this question by doing if num equal to 1, printf red, else if num equal to 2, printf black, and so on. But whenever you have a case where you're checking for equality of a variable, so that is, you have many conditions and you want to check for each condition, is it possible to get, is this, if, like for example, if section is equal to A, do this, section equal to B, do this, section equal to C, do this. In that case, we use something called a switch case. Now, what a switch case does, some of you might know it, some of you might not. First things first, switch case exists in Java, C++, and C. Switch case does not even exist in Python. So if you're a Python student and you don't know about this, please read about switch case. Okay. Now, what switch case does is it will take this particular element, what's there here, and it will check for equality with it. But when it checks for equality, so for example, let's say num is equal to 2, right? Does it satisfy case 1? No. It satisfies case 2, which is printf black. And what it will do is it will keep executing all of the values from case 2 up until the end. Okay, it will keep executing all the values up until the end. That's the issue with switch case. If you want to stop it from executing all of the values till the end, what you need to do is put a break statement. So what the break statement does is, you said switch, let's say num is equal to 2, it goes to case 2, prints black, and then it breaks. It breaks out of this switch statement completely. That is what a switch case, that's generally how you should write a switch case, where for after each case statement, you should write a break. If you don't give a break, it will automatically go to the next case statement till it finds a break. Okay. So you put a break here as well, right? Because if it's case 3, I wanted to print white and break after that. Case 4, again, break, default, print, no. So what does the default do? Can anybody tell me what is this default keyword for? What is the use of this default keyword? What is the use of this default keyword? Can anybody tell me on the chat? Okay. It is for the unmatched case. Absolutely. If it didn't match any of the previous cases, 1, 2, 3, 4, it didn't match any of them, then it will go to the default case and print no color, right? This is completely optional. You can also write a switch case without a default case as well. You can write it without that also. So yeah, there's a break already over here, so we don't need to do it. So we run it, it works. And you submit it, it works out. So again, fairly standard, fairly simple. This is generally how switch cases, work. If you knew the syntax, then you would get this one. So I think most of you got this one. Let's go to the next question. There's this question called delete duplicate, right? So that's the question. I'll just reset my code for this one. Okay. So the question does this, right? The function int star delete duplicate. What int star means basically is you're going to return a pointer for int, and we'll come to that. But here it just basically means you're going to return an array. So this int star duplicate, delete duplicate, int star arr, int star int len means that you're passing an array of length len, takes an array arr of length len greater than equal to 0 as an input. It is supposed to remove duplicate integers from the array arr such that for each distinct integer, the first occurrence is retained and all the duplicate elements of it are removed. So for example, you have 2, 3, 2, 2, 5, 6, 6, 7. 2, 2 are repeating after 2 has already come. 6 is repeating even though 6 has already come before. So if you were to remove the duplicates, what you'll do is you'll keep the first one, that is 2 here, then you'll keep 3, then you will not take 2 2 because it has already occurred. You'll take 5. Let's say you got 5 here. You'll take 6, right? And then you won't take the next 6 because 6 has already occurred, and then you'll take 7. Okay, so that's how you'll do this. That's how ideally you're supposed to do. So if you were given an array, you will be able to solve it. But how do we make the computer solve it? Okay. Now some other stuff that's given is note. Uh, okay, so before that, function compiles successfully but fails to return the desired result due to logical errors, right? So there are logical errors because of which it fails to return. So if I just do like run, it works, it's compiling, but the answer is wrong, right? In fact, the answer is correct for some test cases, but generally speaking, it's wrong. If I look at it here, what's happening is you're given 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. It's doing 3, 2, 6, 7, 7. For some reason, 7 has come 2 times. 3 is coming before 2. So we are not really sure what's going on over here. Okay. Before we actually go and solve the question, what we need to do is read the note. Note, let the unique elements in the array be m, given as input but not visible to you. So it's coming in the input some m, right? And I think we can see in the input as well. Yeah, here. There are 5 unique elements, right? You can finally see that there are 5 unique elements. While we don't get this 5 unique elements, what we're told is that there are finally 5 unique elements, right? Return an array of size as the input array. So the array should be the size, but in which the first m elements are unique. So the ideal answer to this one, the answer we are supposed to return for 2, 3, 2, 2, 5, 6, 6, 7 is actually, it should be 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. That those are the unique elements. And the array will still contain the non-unique elements, but they're after the m unique elements. So what's going to happen is you're going to get 2, 2, and 6 to come after this in the original array. The thing is, the main method is only printing the first 5 elements. So that's the reason why we don't see it. But actually speaking, the elements 2, 6, and 7, 2, 2, and 6, which are the duplicate elements, are present inside the array over here. So when we return, we are returning something like 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 2, 2, and 6, right? Where we will print the first 5 elements because we are given that the first 5 elements are unique, and the remaining elements we will not print because they are duplicate elements. Okay, so that's what the question says. This was the key to the question. What you have to do is you have to return an array of size as the input array. It's not like we have to remove the duplicate elements completely. No, they're still existing in the array. Otherwise, the array size would change. The array size is still len. Okay, it's still len, but the first m elements are now unique, and the remaining parts are the extra elements, the duplicate elements. Okay. Only first m elements of returned array are printed. That's what it is there, right? So the only first m elements are printed. Okay, but we don't know m, and we shouldn't really need to know m also. So let's look at this question. How is it doing it? You have int count is equal to 0 and p I j k. Before I go ahead, now do you understand why your variable names should be much better? If you look at p I j k, they're such bad variable names. I mean, they have given it to you. But when you write code, when you become a software developer, right, which I hope all of you will become, I'm pretty sure if you put in your hard work, you will all become. When you become a software developer, please put good variable names. Don't spend time. I mean, it takes 2 minutes extra, but you will be able to read your code better. Your reviewer, like your boss, will be able to read your code better. Just spend time and write a good variable name. Even when you're trying to debug, you can see that this p, I, j, k, they don't really help out that much. Okay, great. So for example, here P, I don't even know where P is being used actually in the entire thing. For what reason we have declared P, not even sure. Okay, all right. So we have int original length is equal to len, which is great. Okay, and what we have here is for I equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus. So we're going to go through the entire array. For j is equal to I, j less than n, j plus plus. If arr j equal to arr I, then we are doing k is equal to k less than len minus 1, k plus plus, arr k is equal to arr k plus 1. Okay. If you just read the code, you're not really getting what's happening, right? So let's look at it step by step. This is a for loop, this is a for loop, this is a condition, right? Just by looking at the condition, one thing we can simply understand here is that what's really happening. I have that if this element is equal to this element, right? So what is arr j equal to arr I mean? Well, arr I is one element. Let's say we are starting at the first element. If arr j equal to arr I, then what are we going to do? We're going to start from this element. We are going to go till the second last element, and we're going to check 2 consecutive elements, right? Or rather, we're going to store the next element into our current element. Okay. Just to give an example, what we're going to do is what this code does at least, okay, is let's say you have the elements over here 2, 5, 7, 9, 10. Okay, what this code will do is if it starts at 5, it is going to keep taking the next element and bring it over here, right? So what this code will do is it will bring 7 to 5, 9 to 7, and 10 to 9, right? So it will basically become something like um, 2, 7, 9, 10, and then 10 will remain as it is. We'll keep the last element as it is. So we're taking the forward element and bringing it back, right? So we're taking the element that's a little bit ahead and we're bringing it back. Why would we want to do something like that? Well, the reason we would want to do something like that is because what you have here, for example, if you have an array like this one, right? Why we would want to do something like this is you have 2, 3, 2, 2, 5, 6, 7. We notice that here when we start at 2, we'll go through the entire array, right? So when we start at 2, we check 3. Is 3 equal to 2? No. Is 2 equal to 2? Yes, 2 is equal to 2. So what we'll do is we'll take all of these elements, right, and we'll bring it further over here, right? This is what we'll do, because we don't need that 2 element, right? The 2 that was there, we'll bring it here. So actually what we'll do after the first one is we'll take this and we took this much, all of these, and we want to bring it one step back, right? So we'll bring it one step back over here. Okay. Then what we should do is we should start at 3. Okay. No, and then we'll see again for 2. Again for 2, what we're going to do is we check again there is equal to 2 over here. So we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're again take the remaining part, right? So this is the remaining part, right? Yeah, this is the remaining part, and we'll again bring it back, right? So we'll have something like this. Sorry. So we'll take the remaining part like this, that is 5, 6, 7, 7, and we'll actually put it here. Okay. Did we miss out on something? Yeah. So now, as you can see that the first 4 elements are all unique. We'll do the same thing with 3. With 3, we'll check is there any 3s? No, there are no 3s. We'll check with 5. Are there any 5? No, there are no 5s. We'll check with 6. Are there any 6? Yes, there is. So bring forward this thing, right? So we'll bring this forward over here, right? And make it like this. Okay. We'll actually make it like this. So now for 6, it's removed. And then we are at 7. Okay. When we reach to 7, what's going to happen is, yes, these are all there. So you'll keep bringing them back, but that's the same thing. So you don't really have any issues there, right? You'll keep bringing them back one by one, not very big deal at that point. So what's going to happen finally is, since you're bringing back all of the elements from the last towards, like you keep bringing them forward, the duplicate elements will get removed, right? And the first m elements will be all unique. Okay. So hope you got this part, how this is happening. This is the intended thing. It's not happening. This is the intended thing. Why is it not happening, right? So why is this thing not happening? The reason is, if you look over here, it's starting j is equal to I, which means that for I is equal to 0, I'm starting at 2. For j is equal to I, what I'm doing is j is equal to I, I'm starting at 2. If ARR j equal to ARR I, obviously they will be equal because they started off at the same thing, right? So then what will happen is they're equal. Oh, bring the remaining part back. So this 3 will come here, but we don't need that 3 to come here because this part, these two are not duplicate. Yes, this 2 is duplicate with this 2. For that, you bring all of these things forward, right? You bring them over here. That's fine. But don't bring this one. So this j is equal to I should not start here. Ideally, it should start at j is equal to I plus 1. That's it, right? You could do it at j is equal to 1. The problem with j is equal to 1, somebody just mentioned j is equal to 1. That's why I'm talking it. The problem with j is equal to 1 is, let's say you are at this 2, okay? Or let's say you are at this 5. J is equal to 1 means it will again start from 3. Whereas that's not the intention, right? With j is equal to 1, when j is equal to I plus 1, you will start at 6. So you're always checking to the right side, are there any duplicates on the right side? Okay, you always check for the right side if there are any duplicates or not, right? That's what we are doing over here. Okay. Yeah. So let's see if that works out. This is just a comment. I'll just remove this comment. Don't need this comment, but yeah. So j is equal to I plus 1. So I'll just do run. It works out. Submit works out. So again, a very minor change, that is j is equal to I plus 1. That's literally 2 characters you have to type, not even 1 line. just 2 characters you have to type, but you have to understand what the code is trying to do. And you will not understand what the code is trying to do unless you take an example array, and for that example array you actually do these steps by yourself, right? Now again, some people might ask, well, I have only 20 minutes and I have to do 7 questions, how will I do this for all the 7 questions? Well, the answer is you should get to a stage where just by looking at the question you are able to mentally do some things. But if you're just going to guess in MCQs, you can still guess. Here you can't even guess, right? You will have to guess. For example, oh, maybe this is not I plus plus, this is J plus plus. This should be J plus is equal to 2 or something like that, right? So there's no point guessing over here. If you know the logic, then just one change does the trick. And for that, you need to visualize what's actually happening with the array. Once you visualize it, then you'll be able to solve the question, right? So that's this one, this question, which is um, okay, why len minus 1? Why len minus 1 for k loop, sir? Okay, great. And why j is equal to I in the loop? So j is equal to I is not in the loop. Actually, j is equal to I plus 1. That's what we're doing. Why are we doing k less than len minus 1? Very good. Very, very good. So what is happening over here? ARR k is equal to ARR k plus 1, right? Which is nothing but we are bringing back. So for example, when we are at 2, 3, we notice that 2 is a duplicate. We want to bring when ARR k is equal to ARR k plus 1. So for this 2 is equal to this 2. This 2 becomes 5. This 5 becomes 6. This 6, so this, one second. Yeah, this 5 becomes 6 over here, right? This one becomes 6 also. This one becomes 7. And this 7, what does it become? It stays 7, right? We should not do 7 is 8 or something like that, right? We shouldn't really be doing any of that stuff, right? So we are like, for example, I mean, there's no 8 over here, but there's nothing out after 7. So to avoid that out of bounds exception, we are doing k less than len minus 1, right? It's the same thing as doing k is equal to less than equal to len minus 2, right? The reason for this len minus 2 is this is the len minus 1th index. I want to go only till the len minus 2th index because the next index I want to port here or copy here, but this one I don't have anything else to copy, so I have to leave it as it is. That's why we did k is equal to less than equal to len minus 2 over here. Okay. After count is equal to count plus 1, we are having j is equal to I. Count is equal to count plus 1, j is equal to I. Why are we having that? Yeah, you can remove this also. I mean, it doesn't really affect anything at all because you have j is equal to I plus 1 over here. It doesn't affect anything at all actually. If you just check it, one second. Yeah, hold on. Yeah, it is, hold on, 1 second. We have this, and why are we doing j is equal to I? It's a good point. If ARR j is equal to ARR of I, we do this, k less than equal to this, and length is equal to length minus 1, count is equal to count plus. Okay, all right, fair enough. So what's happening in the last part is here we are decreasing the amount that we want to go for, right? So when you do len is equal to len minus 1, when we are doing j is less than len, right? So when we're doing j less than len over here, we will not go all the way to 7 now. There's no point in going all the way to 7. We know that this 7 is now a duplicate, like it's not going to have any value for us. So hence what we do is we are saying we'll go only till this particular 7 over here. So that's why we do len is equal to len minus 1. Count is equal to count plus 1 is basically increasing the number of count of the time we've done. And then what j is equal to I is doing is, why are we going for j is equal to I over here? Because we pulled everything back and, hold on. So if we pulled everything back, so if I was 0, we did 3, 2, 5, 6, 6, 7. We did j is equal to I plus 1. Second. J is equal to I plus 1. It did everything. So in the next thing, what we got was 2, 3, 2, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7. Yeah, we got that. Then if we make j is equal to I over here, and if ARR of j is equal to ARR of I, 1 second. Okay, all right. If I go to j is equal to I, oh, okay, all right. The reason why we did j is equal to I plus j is equal to I is, see, the thing is, if you did something like ARR of j is equal to ARR of I, right? That's what we did. So that means that we brought back all the elements. So what was the original array over here, right? What's the original array over here? you look at it, this was the original array, right? Let's keep that original here. It's always good to have the original over here itself, right? So original is equal to this. Okay, yeah. So this was the original. Now what we did was we are at 2, 3, and then we are at 2 over here, right? ARRJ is equal to ARR of I. We know that is the case. So what we did was we took up, one second. Yeah, so we started from here, j is equal to I plus 1. Then j became this value. We saw that it is the same value over here. Yeah, one second. ARRK. Okay, so what happens in the first case? Okay, let's do it step by step. What really happens in the first case? When I is equal to 0, let's do it like this. I is equal to 0, j is equal to 1, right? So, okay, sorry for that. I is equal to 0, j is equal to 1. Then what's happening? J is equal to 1, and ARR of I is equal to 2. And then ARR of j initially, when we are at this case, ARR of j is equal to I plus 1, right? J is equal to I plus 1. So ARR of j is 3, right? If ARR of j equal to ARR of I, are these two equal? ARR of j equal to ARR of I? No, they are not. Len becomes length minus 1. So what we are doing then is we are decreasing the length, because it won't really enter into this condition over here. No, it won't enter into this condition at all. If ARR j equal to ARR of I, it won't enter into this condition at all over here. Take this part out. Yeah. Yeah. So it won't enter this condition. Then it will do j plus plus. J plus plus, it goes to this 2 over here, right? When it's at this 2 is ARR of j equal to ARR of I. Yes, these both are equal. So then what it's going to do is it starts at k is equal to j. That is, it starts at this point, right? And it will bring back all of these ones over here forward. So as we said, we're going to bring all of these over here. So this is, second iteration. It's going to bring back all these 2, 5, 6, 6, 7 after 2, 3. It's going to bring back here, and then there's a 7 over there as well, right? So that's what it will do at the end of the second iteration. Now at the end of the second iteration, yeah, so at the end of the second iteration, what's going to happen is len is equal to one second. When it did this, it finished all of this aspect. What it will do is len is equal to len minus 1. So it's saying basically, see, the last one is not really useful for you. Don't even do anything about that. So you can just remove. It's as if not considering the last one. There's no point, because this 7 will always be duplicated with the next 7. So there's no point of even going that far next time around. So k is equal to length minus 1. Count is equal to count plus 1, increasing the count. And j is equal to I. What does j is equal to I mean over here? At this current point, what was the value of j? The value of j was 1. We want to bring the value of j is equal to 0 over here, right? Is that what we are saying? Yeah, we'll bring the value of j is equal to 0. Then what will happen? J will do plus plus, so that it again comes to 3, right? Because we don't want to skip it 2 times. So when j is equal to I, remember, we always want to start at I plus 1, right? Once you deleted a duplicate, you will again want to start from I plus 1, right? So we want to keep checking for this 2. How many 2's are there? We want to keep checking for that. Then we'll move to 3, then we'll move to 5, then to 6, to 7. So the moment you deleted 1, 2, doesn't mean that now I have to start at this 2, okay? There is still possibility that this one was a 2, right? And if this one was a 2, I need to start always at j is equal to I plus 1. So that's why we did j is equal to I over here, so that it will come to j is equal to I plus 1 every time. So that's the reason, right? So again, take a pen and paper and solve it. You'll get it at that time. And yeah, it's a bit, somebody saying it's a bit confusing. Definitely it is confusing. It's one of the, it's the 6th and 7th question of your AMCAD Automata fix. Definitely, I mean, it will be more of a difficult one. But what you do, really, what I do in such cases is I take a pen and paper, and I also, for each value, I, j, a of I, a of j, k, I write the value in each iteration, okay? And then I keep checking what will be the value now, what will be the value now, what will be the value. Is it increasing as per the given expectation or not, right? So that's the best way to check that one out, okay? Again, I'll just tell you what's happening here. How do we delete this is we're checking this 2 over here, right? Before this 2, what we want to do, I'll tell you first of all, is we want to get, if there's any 2 in the remaining part of the element in the array, you know what you should do? You should remove this 2. But how do I remove this 2? There are many ways of removing it. What the question is trying to do is take the rest of the array and just copy it back over here. So what it will happen is it will come like this. But if you take the rest of the array and copy it back, the last element is now redundant. It's useless now. We don't need it. That's why this len is equal to len minus 1. It's saying that, I know the last element will be a repeat because we only copied it. Okay. So don't worry about going to the last element again. That's the first thing. The second thing what you should do is once you copied it back, you should start again from this point, right? Because it could just be a possibility that this is the one that has been duplicated right now, right? For example, if this question was not like this, if it was 2, 2, 2, 5, 6, 6, 7, right? We would come to the first element and find out, oh, okay, 2 is duplicated, okay? Then what you should do, you should copy the remaining part, and bring it over here. Copy the remaining part and bring it over here. But if you do that, now if you do j, if j continued normally, it would continue from this 2, right? Because we started at this 2. But says no, it could be that there is still a duplicate here. You have to start again at j is equal to I plus 1. So that's what this one is doing. This is doing j is equal to I, so that when the loop ends, it will do j plus plus and it will become j is equal to I plus 1 again, right? That's the reason why it's doing this. Take a pen and paper, take a rough paper, and try to do this. Try to note down all the elements again by yourself. Then you'll do it. Sir, if len is decremented inside the loop, is it reflected in the for condition, that is for I less than len I plus plus? Yes, it will be reflected there as well. Every time what happens is, okay, this is a very good question Dhananjay has asked, and I actually want to also touch on this. We're doing len is equal to len minus 1. We know it will affect this length over here. Will it affect this length also? The answer is yes, it will affect this length also. And yes, it will affect there. Now, the one thing I will say is though, it in Python, it does not affect, right? So this is one thing. If you did for I in the range, let's say n, and n changed inside, in Python, it will still continue with the same n before, right? So do remember that part. That's one thing. Again, this is all C. For those of you who are in Python, you might be thinking, oh, okay, in Python, it's also the same. It's not really the same. In Python, for I in range n will continue with n, even though you change the value, right? So just telling you that's a small thing. Okay. The recording of this will be available. Please go and check out the entire recording again. If you're still stuck or confused in this one, I'll move on to the next question. I think we spent a lot of time on this one question. So let's move on to the next question. Okay. Great. Let's look at this question. And in this question, what we have is there is some function called get digit sum, int star arr, int len, accepts an integer arr of length n. It's supposed to calculate the sum of digits of smallest element in the input array. So we have to find the minimum element in the input array. And once we found the minimum element in the array, it returns 1 if the calculated sum is even and returns 0 otherwise. So you have to find the minimum number, get the sum of its digits, return 1 if the sum is even, and return 0 otherwise. Okay, 3 things are happening in this one. Okay, so note the function this uses another function int get sum which returns the sum of digits of the input number num. So let's first check this function whether it's working properly or not. Int get sum, int num, int sum is equal to 0 while num is not equal to 0. It's basically what it's doing is it's taking the units digit. Num modulo 10 will always give you the units digit. Why will it give you the units digit? Because it will, so for example, you have something like 1, 5, like something like this, right? Let's say this. When you do modulo 10 of this, what it will give you is, it will give you the remainder when this big number is divided by 10. And when a number is divided by 10, the remainder will be the units number itself. So it's going to be 5 over here, right? That's what this is doing. It's doing just checking up, gets this unit digit, adds it to the sum, and then divides the number again by 10. Why did it do that? Because once you divide by 10, you will be left with this number, right? Integer division, because there's no float division here. We're doing integer division. So when you do, we'll get 1, 5, 4, 7, 8, 9 as the integer division, right? And the remainder will be 5. So, and then we'll again take modulo 10 of this and add it over here. So it becomes 5 plus 9 plus so on. So it will keep adding all of the digits like that, right? So this is correct. This is the very standard way of doing sum of digits. This is pretty standard. So this part looks correct to us. The problem seems to be in the remaining part. Now this is a compilation error question. So as I told you already that in compilation error, simply just run it and oh, okay. I think I have already done the question. That's why it's showing that. I'm going to reset it. Yeah. So I'm just running it, and yeah, you can see that there are a bunch of it already showing you where the errors are. And somebody were asking whether we'll get this or not. Up until last year, you would actually see the compilation error. You would see all of the compiler output and all of that. And as I said, in debugging, definitely you always need the compiler output and all. So you'll get this, right, and it actually shows you where the problem is. It's at the problem of line number 37, min equal to ARRI, and we can already see what the problem is over here, right? That ARR of I, to access an index I of an array, you should use the square brackets, not the round brackets, right? So you just go to line number 37, that's where it is, and you should use the square brackets, right? So this is the first thing. But before we do that, let's actually just understand what this code is doing. So this code, what it's doing is int I comma result. It's going through. It's assuming the first element to be the minimum number, right? And it's going till the end of the array. And if that element is less than the minimum, then we are considering that element to be the minimum. This is the simplest way of finding the minimum element in an array. You all should know this: finding minimum element, finding the maximum element. How it's done is you keep checking if that array element is lesser than the given number. If it is, then that is the new minimum, right? It's like, for example, again, just some of you who don't know, what we do is 10, 9, 12, 14, 8, and let's say 13, right? So what we initially do is we'll consider 10 to be the minimum number. We compare 9 with 10, right? Is 9 lesser than 10? Yes. So 9 is my new minimum number. 12, I'll compare with my minimum, which is 9. Is 12 lesser than 9? No. So our minimum is still 9. Is 14 lesser than 9, which is our minimum number? No. So 9 is still our minimum number. Is 8 lesser than 9? Yes. So now 8 is our minimum number. Is 13 lesser than 8? No. So 8 remains our minimum number, right? So this is what's happening here. If you find a number which is less than minimum, right, then you'll get you make that as the minimum number. So yeah, that was one compilation error. What is the other compilation error? Min undeclared, right? So it's being used in the function, but we're saying it's min undeclared over there. So yeah, that's correct, because we didn't really get this min over here. In fact, the best way is not to even declare and initialize this over here. What you should ideally do is should do int result min over here, and you should do min is equal to ARR of 0 over here, like this, right? So we're writing it outside the loop right now. Anything else that the thing is saying? No, not really. So if we just run it, okay, now it passes the test cases. Okay. It didn't really pass all of the test cases. There is still some problem. So at least we've got rid of the compilation error. Now see, the question was not a logical question, but still, because of the compilation error, we fixed it, but still it's giving us a logical error. Because it's the compilation error, there seems to be a logical error. What is the possible logical error? Well, if we come down here, let's look at it. What could be the possible? So we are getting the minimum over here. If result is equal to get sum, so the minimum is fine. What you're saying is if result is equal to 0, return 0. But if result modulo 2 is equal to 0, return 1. So see, here if we got 0, as per this condition it should be 0, but as per this condition it should be 1, right? So obviously there is some logical mistake over here. Let's go back to the question. Let's go back to the question over here and just check it out again. The question says, it is supposed to calculate the sum of the digits of the smallest element in the input array. It returns 1 if the calculated sum is even and returns 0 otherwise. Now, for all purposes, 0 is generally considered to be an even number, right? I mean, can you really call it an odd or even? But there's no point in keeping this condition over here, right? So if you remove that condition and if divided by 2, that is, if it's an even number, then it's return once. Otherwise, you have to return 0. Now it works out, right? Yeah, it does. Now it does work out, because the question very clearly said that it is if the calculated sum is even, return 0, return 1, otherwise return 0, right? So now is 0 an even number or an odd number? That's a different story. It's kind of an even number only. But our point is, if it's an even number, which is this the case, return 1. In all other cases, return 0, right? Yeah, and 0 is even only, I guess. So yeah. So this is how you'd solve it. So we did two things. We removed the minimum is equal to ARR of 0. We put it outside the for loop, and we did this result mod 2 thing over here. So yeah, three questions that had come yesterday. Not very straightforward. I think the first one was very straightforward if you knew switch case, but the other things are required some thinking, some probing, and I think many of you got it. So that was good to see. All right, so let's continue with our session today. That was the discussion of yesterday's question. If you still have any doubts in any questions or concepts that we had covered yesterday and day before, please let me know. I'll cover them. Otherwise, we'll go to our concepts classes for today. So today, what I'll do is I'll be covering. Yeah, when will you post the previous assessment answers? As I said, our team is already like working on it right away, and any minute now we'll be uploading it. My deadline that I've given to the team is by tonight, so by tonight it should definitely be uploaded, right? So Pawan, I hope that answers your question. um, let's go on to some programming questions for today, right? So let's look at actual coding questions. And before I come to coding questions, there is one topic that I think you all should know. It is the topic of pointers, which I think many of you are scared of after your first year C programming. But yeah, it will help you in getting a job. And it's not very difficult. Python students and even Java students, I'll say, you have it easy in the sense that you don't have to study pointers, but companies will ask it. It is part of your syllabus, so it will definitely be asked, right? So let's actually learn a little bit more about pointers. And okay, let me actually open up a compiler and like 1 second. Yeah, I'll open up. This is the GDB compiler. I'm not opening my local compiler because I want you all to see how this GDB compiler works. Also, you can just go to onlinegdb.com and you can check the C over here, right? And you can click this programming language C and you can start compiling in that, right? This is simple hello world over here. Int main return 0. Even void main will work. Okay. All right. So let's understand what pointers are. Okay, and I'll keep sharing. 1 second. Sorry, let me share my screen as well. 1 second. Okay, sorry for that. I'm on online GDB compiler, everybody. I just missed, I forgot to share my screen. I'm on the online GDB compiler. You can just go to onlinegdb.com and or even if you Google C compiler online, you'll get this and you can get the C language here, right? I suggest doing this because a lot of you asked yesterday, how can you install a C compiler in your mobile? You can't really, but you can put it up on the web and you can do it this way. So I'll take all the examples like this. Anyway, let's look at some let's start the pointers from the very basic, right? So let's look at it in this way, right? So let's say if, for example, I have like int age is equal to 1, right? Okay, that's too young. Let's probably put age is equal to 50. Okay, and we'll do something like this: printf modulo d, okay, and age. And so we all know that what this will actually do is, I'll run this, but it's going to print out the age, which is 50, right? So it's going to print that 50 out over here, hello world and 50. That's what it printed, right? And let's say I remove this hello world now. If I remove this hello world part and I run it now, it's going to print out 50 over here. This is very standard. This is straightforward stuff. You've all done this 100 times. Okay. What does a pointer do? What a pointer does is your C or C++, these are all low level languages. When I say low level, I don't mean they're low quality languages. It means that they're much more closer to the system and they give you an entire mechanism of controlling the system. So your memory that you have, because at the end of the day, your program needs memory and your program needs to store things, right? So the C program and the C++ give you a control of the memory itself, which is something that Java and Python do not do for you. Okay. So when I say they give you control of memory, what I can actually do is I can create something called a pointer. And what this pointer will do is it will store the location of this variable. It's not going to store the value of this variable. The value of this variable age is equal to 50 exists, but that 50 is also stored in some location, right? If I want to know the location of that age, that is when I use something called a pointer, right? Now, how do I get even the location of that particular age, right? How do I even get that? That is, to even get that, you use something called AND. What this AND will do is it will give you the location of that particular age, right? Or any particular variable at that point. Okay. So for example, the syntax of doing this is int star ptr is equal to and age. Okay, let's understand this one by one. Okay, if you understand this clearly, if you get the concept right, it's really not that difficult. Okay, so what you have here is int what the star PTR says is, you know what, this is a pointer, but it can point only to a location which is storing an int. I can't point to location storing to a string, to storing to a character and all. No, we're saying that it is pointed into a location story of int type. Okay, and what is actually stored in that is stored this value called and age. And age means is storing the location of age into this PTR over here. If I want to print the value of this, if I want to print the address, whatever is in this PTR, I do something called modulo P, and I will do PTR, right? So let's say I did this, and let me run this. Okay, you see this value, it's some value. It's not a junk value. I think a lot of students have this habit of calling this a junk value. It's not a junk value. Rather, on the system in which this program is running, on that system, this is the address of whatever variable we stored 50, right? This is the address of that particular variable. So this int star PTR equal to and age, what it will do is it will take the location of variable age and it will store in this PTR. It's as simple as that, right? If I wanted to keep something else like char C is equal to E, right? Because I can only store one thing. So let's say char C is equal to E. Then I'll do something like char star char underscore PTR is equal to and C. Okay, or let's not call it char PTR, let's call it PTR2. PTR2. Okay. All right. So once we did this, I can again do the same thing. Right, and I can just do PTR2. Right, and I'll actually give a backslash n also, so that we get a new line. Okay. Right, so you see that one of the, this is another address and this is where the E character is stored. Okay, now notice the difference between both of these things, right? Notice the difference. Here we are declaring a variable and we're storing this value in that variable. Here we're declaring a pointer and storing the location of a variable into that pointer, right? How do we get the location? We are using this and symbol over here. This is why we use point star over here. If we did not use a star here, even then we could have done int PTR is equal to and age, but that would be wrong. Okay. The reason for that is this, it would then treat this as another integer, right? We don't want to store it as an integer. It is a pointer, right? Pointer will store the location of a particular variable, right? It stores the location of that variable. So that's why we use a star here to say that no, it's not an integer. It's a pointer to an integer data type. That's what we are trying to say over here. Okay. And that's what I'll just, that's the major part of knowing pointers is this. The second part is, I'll just come to it in a bit. Okay. Yeah. So a pointer stores the address of a variable, right? In that pointer, you can have the address of a variable. You are used to store the location of the variable. And this is exactly what we covered so far. Okay. Let's look at some more stuff right now. The other stuff that is important to know is, let's say I have the location of the variable. So this PTR will give me the location of the variable, right? So if I print PTR, I get the location of the variable. But I say, you know what? The address is this, right? So I can actually write it like this. So address is this, but what is the value of it, right? So I and you know that the value of it is actually, so if I do something like this, value is, let's see, yeah, value is age, right? We know that the value is some integer and we'll put age over here, correct? So we'll run it. And yeah, we get address is so and so. Oh, we give a backslash n here. Let's remove that backslash n just for better formatting. Okay, so what we're getting is, no, it's taking so long. Yeah, address is so and so, value is 50, right? We know that the value is stored here. But let's say I did something like this, right? Int age 2 is equal to 100, 75, right? Let's keep it like that. age2 is equal to 75, and int star ptr is equal to and of age2. Okay, it's not and age, it's and age2. If I run this again, what am I going to get? I'm going to get that ptr stores the location of age2, but we're still printing the value of age, right? Which is wrong, right? We should not be printing the value of age over here. Rather, we should be printing whatever is the value it's stored in PTR. Now, let's say I didn't write this, right? I know I wrote this age2, but I don't know really which variable it's pointing to, right? Or let's say in a function we got this variable, but I don't really know what it's pointing to, right? How do I find the value of a pointer, right? I know that it's a pointer, right? I know that there's a location for it, but how do I get the value of that location? Because if I know the location, it should be easy for me to, go to that location, and whatever the value is stored in that location, you should be able to give me that. So the way you do that is something like this, right? Let's see the output of this one. Right now we're getting value as 75. What a star PTR will do, okay, is exactly what sorry, not that. What a star PTR will do is it will say, you know what, whatever was the value at PTR, whatever is the value at the location PTR, go and unlock that and print it for me, right? That's what the star will do. The star will say, go to that the PTR will go to that location. Star PTR will say, no, I don't want the location value. I want what's inside that location, that value. That's why we did this star PTR over here. And that's why we got 75. Now, if we make this as age1, we will get both the location of age1 as well as the value of age1 as well. Okay, age1 itself is not defined. Okay, so you get this, and value is 50 because the age1 is 50, and so we stored the location of age1 and we made the value over there as different, right? Okay, now somebody is asking me that I've heard somewhere that you can, instead of doing modulo p, you can also do modulo x, right? Is that correct or wrong? Well, let's just run it and check whether that works out for us. Do you see that there's a difference? I did modulo x, I got this, and if I did modulo p, I got a different value, right? So what is the value here? DBB5E170, and what's the value here? Yeah, it's not at all the same thing. The reason for that is modulo x, okay? Modulo x is to print your hexadecimal value. Little bit complicated, but let's just go with it. So everybody already knows that there's something called the binary, there's an octal, there's a hexadecimal. These are all ways of storing numbers, right? What's the difference between all of them? Will go differently. What modulo x does is, given a number, it will print in a hexadecimal format. If your memory is stored in hexadecimal, it will print the same answer as this modulo p. But if it is not, then these will differ. And this is very much the case in case of 64-bit computers. So you must have, when you check out your processors, right? Whenever you're checking out your processors, it's a 64-bit computer, it's a 32-bit computer, and so on. In the case of 64-bit computers, generally speaking, this value will differ simply because the memory stored is a little bit different. The memory given to you in your the memory given to run your program is different as well, right? So that's why this will come out a little bit differently over here. What's the difference between modulo L and modulo D? That is the difference between long and integer, right? So that's the difference between long and integer over there. We'll do a separate session on what is the difference between printing like this and this. My suggestion also to you would be a simple, just try it out once and you'll also see what are there, because there are infinite such variabilities. What's the difference between if I do mod D but with a character, mod D but with a float, what's going to happen? Try all these out on your system, you will figure it out. I'm not going into those permutations, combinations right now. But yeah, what I'm saying here is you don't do a modulo X. The correct way to do is a modulo P over here. That's the right way to do it. Okay. All right. So, yeah, this is this part, right? So first thing, again, a revision, because most people get confused. I hope everybody is taking notes right now. Please take all the notes. What I'm saying is, this part, everybody, we've been doing it since the first year. We know how it is. It's very simple. If I do int age1 is equal to 50, it means that this age1 is the variable of type integer and it's storing this value 50. Finish. Very good. We all know this. The second thing is, if I do int star ptr, it means just this, right? If I did just this, what it means is this is a pointer, right? And it can point to any memory address that is going to store an integer, right? It's going to provide to any memory address or any box that's going to store an integer. If we did something like this, it's going to say, oh, you know what, age 1's location, I want you to store in this PTR. Okay, store this age 1 location in this PTR over here. Okay, now I have the location, I have age 1 as the location, right, and age 1, but I want to print the actual value at that particular location. So I do that using the star over here. In fact, just to show you how that can be done, the star PTR, you could also do something like and age 1, right? You could also do something like this, star of and age 1, and it would still give you the same answer, right? Because this and age 1 is the location, star of and age 1 is like, okay, whatever is at that location, print the value of that location. So that's what the star of and age 1 will do for you. Okay, all right. Any doubts in this part so far? Because now I'm going to go to arrays. So any doubts in this part so far? Okay, no, great. So now let's go into the arrays part. Now the arrays has another speciality. Okay, let me just check here. Yeah, 1 second. I just want to share the slides with you. Yeah, so arrays. So address of address is a value. No, address of address is not a value. You could have a pointer of a pointer, that's a different. Let's not get into that right now. I'll cover that a little bit later. But the value of an address is a value. That is, you get an address. It's basically like saying you live somewhere, right? So let's say somebody is living in Delhi, right? Okay, Delhi is the place, all right, but who is sitting inside Delhi right now, right? That person's name is the value over here. The location of that person is Delhi. That's what we're trying to say. All these analogies are not really the best, but I hope you got the analogy over here. Okay, pointers and arrays. So the other important thing now, what C does to even help you out further is array name is also pointer to the first element of the array, right? And now this will solve your problem of yesterday about why we are passing array as a pointer into a function, right? What do I mean by this, right? Let's come back and just do a quick check on our arrays again, right? So I'll just define a quick array over here. Let's take 3 values in that array, right? So int arr1 is equal to, let's say, 2, 7, 13, right? Let's say these are the 3 values over here, and int arr1 is like this, right? And how do we print all of the values? Well, you could print them by for loop, or you could just do something like printf mod d. Second, you can do printf mod d, and mod d, right? And you can do something like arr1 of 0, arr1 of 0, arr1 of 1, and arr1 of 2. Again, we could do something like this, right? Okay, and let's just run this and check whether it works. Yep, some compiled successfully, and then we'll get the print 2, 7, 13. Yeah, this is as expected, right? Everybody got this as expected over here. So Dhananjay has asked the question. Just wait till this array part is over, then I'll come back to answering that question. Okay, so this is as expected, right? I think everybody would have got this, that if you define an array like this, array of 0 is this, array of 1 is this, array of 2 is this. That's great. One thing you may all not know is actually arr1 is also a pointer. While arr1 is the name of the array, arr1 is also a pointer. Now, what does a pointer store? We just discussed this. What does a pointer store? Can you tell me? What does a pointer store inside it? Address. Very nice. ARR1. So pointer stores an address. Here ARR1 is a pointer. If it's going to store an address, ARR1 is actually storing the address of the first element of this particular array. So you have ARR1 of 0, right? ARR1 of 0, if you did AND of this, is the same as ARR1 itself. Okay. So if you did AND of this, it's the same as ARR1 itself. I think you can probably check this out in this way as well. If I did mod p, okay, I'm actually checking this for the first time, but we can find it out ourselves. So if we do printf mod p, we can check out that these two things are in fact the same. We can do ARR1, right? And we can do ARR1 of 0, and we can do AND over here, right? And let's just run it out and check. if you notice, both of them are the same thing, right? If you notice, both of these are the exact same thing over here, right? Okay. Why is that? It's because the ARR1 is a pointer to the first element of the array over here, that is ARR1 itself, right? The first element is ARR1 0, right? So it will point to the first element, and it will have the location of that element. Okay. Now, the other great thing about pointers is they move forward in the unit in which they are representing. So what this integer ARR1 is doing is it is pointing to an array of integers, right? So you have this ARR1, and ARR1 is an array of integers. It means that ARR1 is a pointer of type integer, right? So ARR1 is a pointer of type integer. It's an array also, and it's also a pointer of type integer. All right. So if I want to get the value of the first element, one thing I can do is ARR1 of 0. The other thing I can do is I can also do star ARR1, right? I can do star ARR1 as well, and I will still get the answer, right? So if I do star ARR1, the answer I should get is 2, because we are saying get me, and it is actually 2, because we're saying get me the value which is stored at this location, that's ARR1 over here, right? Okay. Everybody got this part? This particular part for the arrays, then we'll come to all the other ones. But did you all get this part? Because again, pointers can be confusing, hence I'm asking you all. Okay, great. Okay, so this is that. Now let's go into something finally called pointer arithmetic. Okay, and what a pointer arithmetic does basically is that you can manipulate. Yeah, so okay, once repeat. Okay, I'll just repeat this part as well. So very good, thanks for just asking for the repetition. Let's start with again, just I'll quickly repeat this part, everybody, and then we'll go ahead. So int ARR1 is equal to 2 7 13. This part is very straightforward to everybody, that what we have is this is an array which is pointing to 2, which the array values are 2 7 and 13. What you may not know is that ARR1 is an array, but it's also a pointer, and that pointer location, because the pointer has to contain some location, right? So the pointer always points to location. That pointer location is actually the same location as the first element of that particular array. So the first element of this array is 2. It is going to store the value of 2, the location of 2 itself, right? That's so the ARR1 is actually a pointer to that. How can we verify this? Well, very simply put, you can verify it like this. If you did this, right, and I did ARR1, right, what does star ARR1 mean? Well, if ARR1 is a pointer, star ARR1 will unlock the value in that pointer's address. So this pointer, whatever address it's storing, it will go to that address and it will say, oh, you know this address, what's the value stored inside that address? Print that out, right? And that is what this one will do for us. That is actually going to print out 2 over here, because the values to what ARR1 is a pointer to the address 2 over here. If I just swap these, right, if I made this something like 7 and I made this 2 over here, I will get the answer 7 over here, because now my first location is actually 7. So I get 7 printed over here. All right, great. So I hope you got that part. Now, the other thing you can do with a pointer is you can actually do arithmetic with it. Okay. What do I mean by this? Okay. If I just did something like for, let's say, or yeah, actually even better than that, let's not even use a for loop. I'll do this in another way, right? So if I do print f, 1 second. Yeah. So for, yeah, printf mod p, we'll just use this one here. Yeah. Mod p, mod p, mod p. Okay. Let's print the values of what I want to do is ARR1 is there, right? And ARR1, right? So ARR1 of 0. So what I'm doing is ARR1 of 0 and ARR1 of 1 and ARR1 of 2, right? So I'm printing the location of all of these particular elements, right? So if I run it, I'll get the location of all these. Printer. Yeah. I'll get the location of all. Yeah, here we go. So I'll get the location of all of these elements over here, right? So I got these elements, right? Okay. Now look at this. This is the best way to probably understand it. So we have and ARR 1 of 0. We already know this and ARR 1 of 0 is what? It's nothing but ARR 1, right? Because ARR 1 is the pointer to the first location. What you can also do is to go to the exact next location. You need not even do ARR 1 of 1. You can just do ARR 1 plus 1. What this will do is it will move to the right, or it will move to the next location by exactly that much space as an integer will take. That's why this int becomes so important, because you're telling this ARR 1 is actually a pointer of type integer. And if I want to move to the next memory location, skip as much memory as is needed for an integer and move to the next memory location. So that is what ARR 1 plus 1 will do. And if I do ARR 1 plus 2, it will give me to that position where I am 2 positions away from the first pointer itself, right? So, second. I think we should print a new line so that you all be able to appreciate these values. Second. Now compare these values, right? ARR 1 of 0 and of that is saying this is the memory location for ARR 1 0, right? We already know that that can also be accessed from the ARR 1, which is the name of the array itself, right? ARR 1 of 1 and of that is the memory location of ARR 1 of 1, right? Or what you could just do is ARR 1, the pointer that is there, you could just add 1 to it. The compiler will automatically move 1 position forward into that position which has the next element. Because an array is contiguous, that is, all the elements are next to each other, just by moving to the next block, it is able to find out, oh, you know what, this is the location over there. And you have this location over here as well, right? That's why it printed this. Now, if you wanted to access ARR of 0 and ARR 1 and ARR 2, this gives you an alternative way of doing that, right? So if I did this as mod D, I can say, oh, you know what, do star ARR of 1, then do star ARR 1 plus 1 and star ARR 1 plus 2, right? So what I'm saying is go to this location ARR 1 plus 1 and go to this location ARR 1 plus 2 and print whatever is at that position, right? We got 7, 2 and 13. That's what we got over here. The same value 7, 2, 13. But this time we accessed it using pointers. We didn't access it using anything else. We accessed it using pointers, right? So yeah, how to print address of nth value in an array. Very nice. How do we print the address of the nth value in an array? So let's say you're given an n, let's int n is equal to 2. To print the address of the nth value, there are two ways that you can print. Somebody is asking me how to print the address of the nth value. So one of the simple things you can do is ARR, either you can just do ARR 1 of n minus 2. 1 second, not n minus 2, sorry. So I could either do ARR 1 of n minus 1, right? Because we are assuming 0 based indexing, right? Or what you could do is ARR, we had this exactly, right? ARR of plus of n minus 1, right? That's how you could also do that value as well. Because plus 1 will get you the second value, plus 2 will get you the third value, and so on, right? You could do this. Both of them will give you the same value. Right? Okay, this is nothing there, that's right. But yeah, that's why we got this 2, because n is equal to 2. Second value, we got 2 over here. Okay. All right, so now I'll take up some doubts. These are the two major concepts that you need to know in an array. Before I go to the doubts, just one very simple thing that I think is the favorite of all interviewers, right? So what's the difference between ARR 1 plus 1, okay, and star of ARR 1 plus 1? This is something you're bound to be asked, okay, by anywhere in any MCQ. Can anybody tell me what will be the different outputs over here? What would be the output for this? Okay, all right. Let's run it and then I'll explain. It's giving 8 2, right? Why is it giving 8 2? The reason why it's giving 8 2 is this star will first apply. This star will first apply to ARR1, and then we'll add 1 to it. So star being applied to ARR1 is 7, because ARR1 itself stores the location of the first element. Doing star to that will give us 7, plus 1 will make it 8, right? Whereas in the second one, what it's doing is first it's incrementing ARR one by one. It's telling, oh, you know what, go here and then print whatever the value is. So the value of that is 2. Hence we got 7, we got 8 over here and 2 over here, right? Again, it's a famous question. Most of you will get this in your programming MCQs. Please be careful of these kind of questions. Okay. Now I'll just go back to some of the doubts that you have. Okay. Should I explain this again? Somebody's asking to explain again. Okay. Basically speaking, what's happening? What does the star operator do? The star operator takes the element that is next to it and it unlocks that, right? So it unlocks that location and tells us what's the value in that location. Here, what that star is doing is it's taking this entire ARR1 plus 1 as the address. Now, ARR1 is the address to 7, but ARR1 plus 1 will get us to the next address, which is the address to 2. Okay, so it's to the address of 2. And then when you do star of that, it says, okay, whatever is at the address of 2, print the value of that, which is 2 itself, right? However, when we did it here, what is happening is star ARR plus ARR1 plus 1, it's first unlocking the value. The unlocking the value of this is 7, and it's then adding that 1 to that unlocked value. So that unlocked value is 7. If you add plus 1, it becomes 8, right? It's like saying basically, if I can give you an example, it's just the sequence of instructions basically, right? It's just a sequence of instructions over there. Okay. Okay. For pointer, why don't we use mod D even though we declare a pointer as an integer? Very good question. The answer is we never declared the pointer as an integer. We are saying this is a pointer by doing something like int star n, okay, is equal to, let's say, ARR1, let's say, right? The moment we are doing this, we are saying it is not an integer. It is a pointer that can point to locations which store integer. It can't point to locations which store non-integers. It's a pointer that's storing. And why can it only point to integers, locations which store integers? Because integer itself has a byte size, right? It is about 4 bytes, right? So integer itself has about 4 bytes. It can only, so this pointer can only point to locations which are 4 bytes in themselves, right? That's what it's basically trying to say. So that's why we use modulo D for the integer, but modulo P for the pointer. Okay. This is a heavy topic. I want you all to, just take this in and figure it out, right? Okay, somebody asking a question. Sir, address locations will be random and will have some format for all types like int, char, float. But why we are declaring like int star, char star, float star, right? Okay, as I just answered, int star, char star, and float star is telling the particular pointer how much memory it can actually point to at a time. Like char, for example, is just 1 byte, right? And int can actually store up to 4 bytes. So the pointer, when it will move forward, will only move forward by 1 byte in the case of a char, but in case of an integer, it's going to move forward by 4 bytes. That's why you declare it as int, char, or float, right? The second thing is they will all have some random locations. No. And like, for example, if you have an array over here, while the first one will be random, the next two will be right next to the first one. They're not going to be too far away. Okay. So it's not going to be fully random as such, right? Don't think that it's completely random. Okay. Somebody is asking dynamic memory allocation. That will increase the time of this class. I don't really want to get into that. I want to show you 2 more questions. Again, as I was saying, pointers, it's good to know. You will get 1 or 2 questions on it, but in CTS, I don't think so. In NQT, you will get programming MCQs based on it. Okay. I'll quickly show you one thing that we were discussing yesterday, right? Why we are passing it as a star, right? So hold on a second. Let us pick up, let's say, example, find minimum element, right? Here we had int star ARR1. I hope you got this now. Int star ARR1 means that it's a pointer to, it's a pointer of integer type. And if we pass an array, that's the same thing as passing a pointer, right? So that's, now I hope you understood what this particular thing means, right? Okay, so does pointer also store the number of element it is pointing towards? Very good point. A pointer will only store the location at which it is, right? So its pointer is actually a very dumb thing to think. It only stores the location. For an array, for example, it won't store how many array elements are there. It will store the array starts here and it will just keep continuing. But it doesn't store how many array elements are there as such. That it's not going to do that part. Okay. So it's not going to actually store the number of elements, etc. in the pointer itself. What will be the output when you print n? This thing int star n is equal to arr1. So if you're seeing, if I print it as an integer, yeah, we can check that if you want. Although I wonder what it will print as. It will just take the hex value and try to convert it to an integer at max, though I'm not sure. Yeah, it will take the address, it will try to convert to an integer. That's what it did. It took the address and it's trying to convert to an integer and it's printing that integer, if that integer was present here, right? Okay, so index out of bounds error we are getting when elements are greater than length. Do you ever get index out of bound in C and C++ and all? Do you ever get index out of bound in C and C++? Let me just give an example. You see, it compiled successfully. Did you get an array of out of bounds in C or C++? You never got it. You got a zero value instead. So this, I hope now you're understanding, this was one of the major reasons why Java and Python were invented the way they were. This is why Java and Python don't have pointers. They have an index out of bounds exception because they protect their memories. A C or a C++ don't protect their memories. They give you the entire memory wherever you get, right? And when you do ARR 1 of 4, even though there are only 3 elements, you try to do ARR 1 of 4 means try to access the 5th element. It means that the compiler thinks you know what's going on, right? You know what's there at that memory. You are trying to access that. Compiler is not going to interfere. In a Python or a Java, what the compiler will say is, hey, you are trying to access something that's out of bounds, right? You don't have right to that memory, okay? Whereas in C and C++, it's like your entire memory is for you, do whatever you want. If you are accessing some memory location, then you must have thought of something, that's why you are accessing that memory location, right? So this is again the difference between C and C++ and all of that, okay? So is it correct that a programmer should think of limits in C and C++? Absolutely, you should always keep thinking of what are all the limitations of C and C++. Programmers should take care of the limits in C and C++. So where it's ending. So for example, you don't have an array dot length, right? In C, in C++, I guess, but in C you don't have an array dot length. This is one of the reasons because it's not stopping anywhere. It can keep continuing anywhere, right? Okay. So guys, this was pointers. We can have limitless classes on pointers. We can keep learning a lots and lots about pointers. The major thing I want you to take back today, I know a lot of new students are there, not people who have never done programming before and so on. Major thing I want you to take back is it's a very simple concept. If I did star data type star var, it means that this data type, this variable, this particular pointer, right, is going to store that particular, one second, I'll just make this PTR, right? What is basically this pointer is going to store is, this pointer is going to store the address of that other variable, right? So it's going to store the address of, let's say if it was and var, it's going to store the address of var. That is the bottom line, right? To unlock the value again, I can just do star PTR and I'll get that value again, right? So that's how it is. The array, in arrays, the array name is also the same thing as the first element of the array, right? It's also the same as the location of the first element of the array, and we can use this to pass it to function and so on, as I showed you earlier, right? So it is a little bit of a separate topic. It's a little bit of a difficult topic, I know, but if you remember these two concepts, then you can definitely at least crack the MCQs of pointers. You may not be able to crack, let's say code debugging asks. I've never seen them ask, but if they ask, you may have some difficulty there, but for MCQs, you should be able to solve just by these few concepts themselves. Okay, right. Let's look at one programming question. Okay. Sir, how do I pass pointer array to a function? It's the same as this. For example, one second. Yeah. Int star ARR. This is the first is the so it's there is something called an array of pointers also, right? I will not get into that. You can have an array of all pointers as well. I'm not getting into that directly, but what basically how can you pass an array into this? You can just give ARR and you can solve it, right? I'll give you an example, right? So we solved this element called we solved this question yesterday called um, there was a find minimum element, right? We all solved this question to find minimum element. In the sort array function, what happens? You pass an array to sort, right? Here int star ARR means I'm passing an array that has to be sorted. How did we pass that sorted array? We just gave the name of ARR1 because the name itself is actually the pointer to the first element, right? So that's why when we did ARR1, it's saying that hey, except a point. No, sorry, I again didn't share the screen. I'll again do it. Okay. Somebody's asking how to share the array, how to how to pass the array as a function, how to pass an array pointer into a function. So as you can see here, the array is defined such that it's going to accept a pointer in itself, right? So int star ARR, it's going to accept this pointer as a function. How did we pass that int star ARR? We passed that int star ARR here sort array ARR1. We are basically passing the entire array that we have received, and we are saying that the pointer to the first element is actually the pointer to the array. And we are saying that yeah, pass this ARR1, and here it's expecting an int star ARR. This could also have been written like int ARR like this, right? These both are valid. Okay, I'm just telling you so that you know int ARR like this and int star ARR, both of these are valid. Okay, let's look at one programming question today. We went a little bit overboard with our pointers thing, but I hope you've found it to be, interesting. But yeah, let's look at another type of question. One second. Okay, let's look at this question. Okay, and this follows a pattern that is very famous. Okay, and this is again a pattern that you should all know on how to solve. So write a program. This is count of digits in word. You'll get this in your CTS automata practice. If you go to strings, you'll get this over there. I'll open it up as well. So you'll get it. CTS automata practice strings count of digits in word, right? That's where it is. Write a program to take string as an input which contains numbers in it. You have to find the frequency of every number from 0 to 9 on that string. So for example, you have AV32. It's basically saying the frequency of 2 is equal to 1, frequency of 3 is equal to 1, right? That's what it's saying over here, right? Okay. How do you solve a question like this one, right? There are one or two ways of solving a question like this, okay? There's a very particular pattern. But before that, let's just look at one last thing, which has nothing to do with pointers and everything. Let's look at one last thing, which is, I think all of you will know this. If I did char C is equal to capital A, and I printed this C not as a character, but as an integer, what will it print? So if I printed this as a character and not as an integer, what is it going to print? Somebody saying ASCII, but what's the value? What's the ASCII value? Yeah, correct. The answer is 65. Absolutely correct. 67, not quite. It's 65. It's 65. So they follow something called an ASCII convention, where each character also has some integer counterpart for it, right? So the only two you kind of need to remember is capital A. So small a is 97, and capital A is equal to 65. If you remember this, you can just do a plus 26 minus 1, right? So because for 65, 65 is A, 66 will be B. So if you do a plus 25, that is going to be Z, right? That's what is going to be Z over here. So 65 plus 25, anybody wants to do it, it's 90, right? So 90 would be Z, right? If you can also verify that very quickly. Yeah, 90 is Z over here, right? And for the next one, it's going to be 97, and somebody saying 122, correct? 97 plus 25 will give you 122, right? So now again, some of you who have not done computer programming before will think what's happening. Simply put, every character has an integer counterpart for it. You can get an integer value for that character, and the ASCII value for this starts at 65. In fact, what you could also do is if you had something like, if you wanted to print the value of, let's say, 0, right? Not 0, you can do it the other way around also, right? I think this should work. If I print 65 like this, yeah. So what this does is it converts 65, which is a, it converts the 65 integer into a character and prints that, and the value you'll get is a. So you can always play between integers and characters in this way, right? So now this question is basically asking us, what it's asking us to do is, it's asking us to, oh no, it's the wrong question. Yeah, it's asking us to say you'll be given a string, right? So you'll be given a particular string, and in that string, you are supposed to find out how many times there's a character and how many times each digit is occurring, right? So to find out how many times each digit occurs. If I want to store how many times each digit occurs, I will need 2-3 things, right? Let's figure out what would be the logic of this particular question. Okay, so in this question, what we want to do is we want to count the number of digits in the word. We want to count. We want to take string as an input, and in that string, we are given a bunch of integers as part of the string itself, right? So, and we want to see the frequency of each digit from 0 up until 9, what is going to be. Now, those of you doing in Java or Python, it's a very simple, straightforward thing to do, right? Yeah, somebody just called me Python dict. That's a simple way to do it. But we'll try to do it in C, and we'll see how it's the best way to do it in C. Okay. So first thing, I'll just initialize with all of the standard stuff, right? stdio.h, int main, right? Or we'll just go with void main, right? And this is there, right? So this is the standard stuff over here. And just to save some of our time, I'm going to just get the very basic of how to actually take input string in C. And while I can write it, I'll just show you where you all can also get this part. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, let's take the input strings, division strings. Let's take this. How do you take input a string? Yeah, this is the one, right, which had some input string part. So we'll take that and we'll take it back to our question. Yeah, let's just paste that here. Hold on. Okay. This is just to avoid again and again, taking everything in. We don't need Boolean as such over here. We can take string.h, char word 100. We're saying at least 100 thing. Let's even not 100. Let's actually take it up to 1000, right? And this will find us the length. We covered this in some previous classes, but very basically what it's doing is for length is equal to 0, word length not equal to null, length plus plus. In C, the string is terminated by a null character, and we are continuously increasing the length till the null character until we reach the particular length, right? So we got till this part. The question is really not about figuring out the length and all of that, right? So this will help us go through the array, but how do we solve such questions which are asking us to count the frequency of each element, right? And not just any element, it's asking us very specifically to count the frequency of these digits, right? So 0, 1, 2, it's asking us to count the frequency of that, right? So the way you would do this is by using something called a frequency array, right? So you do something called a frequency array over here, right? And what that means is I'm going to use one array to store the frequency of another array. Okay. So for example, let's say my word, okay, my word is EDYST, or let's EDY1T 4, 8, and 9, right? EDY1, 4, 8, 9, S and T, right? This is my string. At the 0th alphabet, so at the 0th index, I have E. At the first index, I have D. Second index, I have Y, and so on up until the 8th index. And what I can see is, let's actually make this as 4. So what I can see is that I have 1, 1, 4, 2 4s, and 1 8. One of them is stored at index 3, one of them is stored at index 5, and one of them is stored at index 4 and 6. So from 3 to 6, I have these indexes. The way you would store the frequency is I will take another array. How many elements will I have for which I'm checking the frequency? I have the 10 digits for which I'm checking, right? So if I take this and I remove this part, these parts over here, right? So in this array, this index 0 will store how many times 0 occurs over here. Index 1 will store how many times 1 occurs over here. Index 2 will store how many times 2 occurs here, and so on. At the end of it, what should happen is this array should look like 0, 1, because 1 occurred once, 2 occurred 0 times, 3 occurred 0 times, 4 occurred 2 times, 5 occurred 0 times, 6 occurred 0 times, 7 occurred 0 times, and 8 occurred once, 9 occurred 0 times. That is what this second array, which is called the frequency array, should look like. So we'll traverse the first array, right? We'll go through the first array, and anytime we find an index, we find an element which is, we find an element which is a number, we will try to put that into our frequency array, and we'll increment the number of times this particular array has come, right? Element has come over here. Okay. All right. So let's actually get started with this one. How would we go about approaching it? Okay. So one thing we can do, and I'll just bring this back here, is, so let's create a frequency array, right? We'll create a frequency array, and we say that int frequencies is equal to, and since there are only 9 digits, 10 digits, so we can just actually initialize this ourselves, right? 3 and 3, 6, 9, and these are 10 digits, right? So all of them are zeros right now, from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They're all zeros right now. So this is the int frequency digits that you have over here. Okay, we scanned the word, we got the length of the word, that is great. And now we'll go through the entire array, and anytime we find an element which is a digit, we will increase the count in this particular frequency array, right? But how do you find out if that particular character is an integer or not, right? So for that, again we'll make use of our ASCII values, right? So how can we find out the ASCII values over here? One second. Yeah. So how can we find out the ASCII values over here? We can print char c is equal to this, printf. Let's actually just do this. The value will be 1 only. It's not going to change, but I am just showing you all. If you get stuck, you can always use this to check out what the value is. So the ASCII value of 1 is 1 only. The ASCII value of 0 is also, you can actually just check it in the other way, right? Just want to confirm this for all of you. It's so the ASCII value of 0 is 0, ASCII value of 1 is 1, and the ASCII value of 9 is 9. If you, okay, sorry for this one, actually. It is, what happened? Oh, it's 48, 49, and 57. Okay, my bad. The ASCII value of, okay, then why did we get the other value there? I'll just confirm this again. Yeah. So this is why double checking is always better. Yeah, that's what it is. ASCII value is 48 over here of 0. So what we are basically saying is, if we find any character whose ASCII value is between 48 and 57, then it's an integer, right? So basically, if word of I greater than equal to 48 and word of I is less than equal to 57, if this is the case, we know it's a digit, right? So we know it's definitely a digit. Okay, if it's a digit, what we should do, we should increase the frequency of these elements over here. But by how much should we increase it? So basically, frequency of word of I plus, right? We should increase it by 1. But the problem is, if word of I is 48, it should increase the frequency at index 0, right? So if word of I is 48, it should increase the frequency at index 0, not at index 48. So what we should do is we should make it 40 for word of I minus 48 over here, right? So whatever this word of I minus 48, and for that you'll need to convert it to an integer. So you take an integer word of I minus 48. That's what we should do over here. So we should do integer word of I minus 48, and that should be plus plus. If you want a better way of writing this one, let's write it like this, right? So int current, yeah, int current is equal to int of word of right? So we took the current character, we'll convert it to an integer over here, right? Using this int, this is typecasting. And then what we'll say is, if current, we can then just do with current greater than equal to 48, or current less than equal to 57, then frequency of current minus 48 plus plus, right? So current minus 48 plus plus is what we should do, okay? And we'll increase that value over there, okay? Then finally what we should do is, so we are going through, we went through all of the elements. So now what will happen is, by going through this, we have populated our frequency array, right? So we have populated our frequency array over here. This is the frequency array that we have populated. We want to now print this frequency array, right? So that's what we will end up doing. Okay. How would we print? We have to print in this format: frequency of 0 is equal to 0, frequency of 1 is equal to 1, and so on, right? So let's actually get that thing over here. For int I equal to 0, I less than 10, or I less than equal to 9, whichever works for you, I plus plus. And we want to print it like this, right? So we say printf frequency of 0 is equal to 0. We have to substitute these two values, right? So it should become modulo d is equal to modulo d. The frequency of I is equal to frequency of I, right? That's what we're saying. So frequency of whatever is I is equal to whatever is the value at frequency of I, and yeah, print a new line after that one. Okay, let's run and check. Okay. Expected this or this before scanf. 1 second, we made a mistake. Yeah, this we didn't put a semicolon over here. Anywhere else we missed a semicolon? Doesn't look like it. Okay, the test case is passed. Frequency of 0 is equal to 0, 1 is equal to 0, 2 is equal to 1, and so on. Let's submit and check. Yeah, passes all the test cases. So I mean, the major thing is not about passing the test cases. It is about this pattern, right? It's about actually taking the pattern, and the pattern here is we are storing all of at index 0. Currently the frequency of all the elements is like this. That is that initially 0 occurs 0 times, 1 occurs 0 times, and so on. However, when I encounter a character, I check, is this character a integer or not? And the way I can check if it's an integer is I can use the ASCII value. The ASCII value for 0 is 48. The ASCII value for 9 is 57, right? So the ASCII value of 0 is 48 and the ASCII value of 9 is 57. If my character ranges between 48 and 57, I know that this particular character is an integer. So if my ASCII value is 48, it means that 0 has occurred. It means that in this frequency array, go to 0 and increase 0 by 1, right? So do frequency of that plus plus. So for 48, I need to go to 0. For 49, I need to go to 1. For 50, I need to go to 2. That's why I'm doing minus 48 every time, right? That's why this magic minus this 48 came in. I knew some of you might be confused at this, but 48 came in because the ASCII value of 0 itself is 48. That's why we're doing that. Somebody's asking why we did int current is equal to int of word of I. Word of I is a character. If I want to get the integer value of it, I need to get int. I need to typecast it to an integer. That's what this int is doing. It's typecasting it to an integer, right? So there are other questions like this. This is one such pattern that I wanted to tell you, which many students don't get. If you're using Python, yes, you can use a dictionary and all of that. That's fine. But use an array to find the frequency. So basically use another array to calculate the frequencies, and you will be able to get it, right? So used another array to see how many times elements occurred in the first array, right? So everybody, any doubts or questions? We have an assessment today also, and today the assessment questions will be on coding questions. We are done with the code debugging part. So today our assessment question, which will start in 43 minutes, it will be on coding questions itself. So do prepare well for that one. Let me know. There will be about, it's a 1 hour test again. There'll be about 3 questions. One of them will be bonus. 2 of them will be regular. Anybody has any doubts or questions? Can we compare characters like 1 less than 0? It's a good point. I think you can definitely. But for any such things, always open up your own compiler and check. As far as I believe, you can definitely do that. Let's actually check that out. Printf. And you can check this out. If 1 less than 0, yeah, yep, you can. In fact, you can make this as far as I know, what it's actually doing is it's actually converting it to an integer and checking. It's actually trying to convert it to an integer and then check it out. Yep, that's what it will do. Doing in Python, getting right in local compiler, but while submitting in TCS online address, getting a runtime error. Okay. So somebody asked about, somebody's asking in Python, I'm getting runtime errors while compiling locally. Sorry, while compiling locally, it's fine, but when I'm running online, it's getting runtime error. The reason for why you would get runtime error is in, for example, in Java, you have in Java and Python, because you have something called out of bounds exception. Um, it is very much possible that your runtime error is coming because of out of bounds exception, right? For example, you are trying to access the last element in an array, right? And that array doesn't even have any size at all, right? If you're doing that in your local compiler, you're probably not checking the test case, but online they are checking the test case, and that's why you might have got. Or you're dividing two numbers while you're compiling, you're not giving the denominator as 0, right? But online they might be giving a denominator as 0. If you do a denominator by 0, then you will get a runtime error, right? So to look out for all these edge cases, right? The problem when you get a runtime error, the problem is mostly in your logic. It's a logical error rather than an error on anybody's system. Right. Today was a very heavy class. I know it was a heavy class, so please make sure you go through and revise all of the questions and all of the topics that have been discussed today. It is very, very important. The recording will be available as usual within by tomorrow morning itself. So please go through and try to revise all the practice things. You have a test starting at 6 o'clock, so all the best for that. And that's mainly it from our side. That's the end of the session today. I hope it was useful. I hope you were able to learn new things in this session. Um, Somebody saying verbal section has been removed from CTS. I'm not 100% sure from the aptitude perspective. I'm not keeping a track of that. If it is the case, then I think you would know better. I'm not sure about the verbal section of it, but the tech and the technical section and all of that, we are keeping track. If there are any changes there, we'll let you know. Right? Essay writing is added. Oh my God. All right. Have fun in that one. My only suggestion in essay writing is try to keep your sentences as short as possible. You all get into trouble when you write long sentences. When you write long sentences, your grammatical mistakes will increase. Like I went, I went to school in so and so place, and then I went to college in so and so place, and then I got my graduation degree. Don't, if the moment you increase that, you will have to start putting full stops and commas and punctuation. Instead of that, say I attended school at this school, full stop. I did my graduation at this college, full stop. That is my major hack or suggestion I can suggest for essay writing. But yeah, I think you've already had CRT training, so I will not, whatever advice they have given you, please follow that advice. That would be much better for you. Great. All right, everyone. Okay. How to make sure TCS online compiler version is same as that of my local one on PC? If so, how to download the exact compiler? Very good question. For CodeVita, what used to happen is that, so the question is basically, I have particular online, there's a compiler. I want to make sure that my compiler is the same as the TCS online compiler so that I don't have any mismatches there. In TCS, at least, TCS CodeVita, they had given a proper FAQ in which they mentioned each compiler and their version. You can check that. In TCS NQT though, oftentimes the compiler version is not the same as the CodeVita one. And I have not found in NQT which compilers they are using. They don't really mention that because I think it's handled by TCS Ion, which is separate from CodeVita team. I'm not sure about that. But for some reason, they don't mention that. So I would just say go with the latest one. That's the best assumption you can make. But we are all confused about that, why they're not releasing. If you come to know, please let us know. We would also like to know which compilers they're using. But for CodeVita, if you want to just know which were the CodeVita compilers, you can just go and check the FAQs, which are there in many places. You can just Google CodeVita FAQs and you'll find it, and you'll get the compiler versions in that FAQ itself. Or just search TCS CodeVita compiler version. Yeah, on Google you'll get the compiler version there itself. All right. Okay, then everybody, thanks for joining in today. You'll get the recording soon. If you have any more doubts or queries, reach out to our mentors on the platform. We'll help you out. All the best for the assessment today, and I'll see you all for tomorrow's class. Wishing you all the best. Thanks so much.